I never thought I'd be living back at 47 Willow Lane at 29. Moving back home was supposed to be temporary, just a stopover while I put myself back together after the breakup with Noah. 3 years of love ended in a single sentence. I don't think this is working anymore. And suddenly my apartment, my routines, even my photographs felt like they belonged to someone else. So, I packed what I could carry into my old hatchback and drove across town, back to the Victorian two-story I'd grown up in. The house smelled the same, a blend of floor polish and my mom's lavender detergent. The stoop lamp buzzed like it always had, flickering against the cracked mailbox stamped 47 BOO. The oak tree out front had only grown more stubborn, its roots lifting the pavement into small hills. Everything looked the same, but I wasn't the same girl who had left. Mom, Elaine, greeted me with that booming laugh she carried even when her arthritis made her wince. "Home again," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "See? The house missed you." Marcus, my younger brother, wasn't as welcoming. He stood in the doorway with crossed arms, shaking his head. "You're almost 30, Jenna. You can't keep running back here when life punches you." I forced a smile, carrying my box of cameras into the house. "It's not running. It's regrouping." He rolled his eyes. "You need to stand on your own. Mom can't keep bailing you out." I didn't respond. I unpacked my old Nikon, set it on the kitchen table, and tried to believe this was a healing project, not a regression. That first week was quiet. I walked the streets with my camera, photographing empty diners and bus depots. I cooked eggs without burning them for the first time in my life. Slowly, I began to breathe again. And then the blinds in my bedroom wouldn't stay down. At first I told myself it was just the house settling, the cords old and slipping. But then my phone charger vanished, and a hairpin appeared on my bathroom counter that wasn't mine. Small things, easily explained, except they weren't. That's when Riley started showing up again. He'd grown up next door, the boy who once traded me sandwiches through the fence. Now in his 30s, he worked night shifts at a courier hub and spent weekends exploring abandoned buildings. He always had keys somehow, keys to places no one else could get into. One evening, I came home from shooting photos and found him sitting on the porch steps, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Late night?" he asked, smiling too steadily. "Just taking pictures," I said, brushing past him. "You talked to someone at 2 a.m. last night?" His voice was casual, but the question made my skin prickle. I froze. "What?" "I heard your voice," he said simply. "Thin walls, you know. Just want to make sure you're safe." I laughed it off, but that night when I hung up my green coat, I found it draped inside out on the chair the next morning. Mom insisted Riley was practical and kind. Marcus, though, muttered under his breath, "He's too interested in you. Way too interested." I brushed both of them off. But in the pit of my stomach, I felt the truth pressing in. Not everyone who remembers you is safe. It was October 18th, a damp autumn night when the air smelled of wet leaves. I came home from photographing an empty bus depot, and there it was. The spare key. Not just any key, but the key. The one I had given Riley when we were 16, after I broke my foot and he swore he'd help me if I ever got locked out. I had forgotten it even existed, tucked away in some dusty drawer. But there it was, sitting on the kitchen island, waiting like a threat. I stared at it for a long time. No note, no explanation. The next night I woke up gasping, certain I'd felt breath near my ear. My room was dim with moonlight, and in the doorway stood Riley. Pale, silent, holding my phone. "I unplugged your charger," he said, calm as if he was announcing the weather. "I needed to know if you'd call him." I sat up, trembling. "What are you doing in here?" His smile was wrong, stretched too thin. "Someone should be keeping you safe, Jen. There are men who don't deserve you." I wanted to scream, but instead I whispered, "Get out." He left without argument, but the air in my room stayed heavy, like he'd left a part of himself behind. The next morning, Mom slammed her mug on the counter when I told her. Tea splashed across the table. You gave him a key? Jenna, you're not a child anymore. Marcus paced the kitchen. You said you were done letting people control you, and now Riley's playing house like this is normal. This place isn't a charity. He grew up next door, I muttered, voice small. Riley stood in the hallway, hands in his pockets. We grew up together. I just want to protect her. Don't you remember when she broke her wrist? I watched her take photos through the window. She shouldn't have to be alone. Mom's voice cracked. Protecting is not possession. I wanted to believe her. But deep down, I feared she was wrong. Because Riley wasn't asking permission anymore. He was taking space that wasn't his. I changed the locks. It should have been the end of it. A locksmith came, turned the tumblers, and handed me new keys. Fresh start, he said. But Riley always had keys. That was the thing about him. I started noticing little shifts. A chair slightly moved. The smell of cigarette smoke clinging to my scarf after a day indoors. My coat pockets turned inside out. I bought a cheap motion-activated recorder and hid it in the hallway. I tucked a tiny camera inside the lampshade. It felt ridiculous, like I was preparing for a ghost instead of a neighbor. But ghosts don't whisper your name at night. One Thursday at 1:17 a.m. I left the back door unlocked on purpose. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone recording, heart pounding. The porch steps creaked. The door opened. Riley's voice floated in, soft as a lullaby. You left it open, you should be careful. I forced my breath steady. Riley, you have to leave. We're not kids anymore. He didn't move. He looked past me into the dark hallway, whispering to no one I could see. I told them I'd keep her. My blood ran cold. Marcus came over after I showed him the recording, his face drained of color. We're going to the police. Mom wrung her hands. This is going to break the neighborhood in half. He's been part of this family as long as we've lived here. I snapped. He's not family, Mom. He's a man who walks into my room at night. For once, Marcus didn't argue with me. He drove me to the precinct, where I handed over the footage. An officer nodded grimly. Riley was arrested 2 nights later, caught with a duplicate key on him. Trespassing. Stalking. The words felt foreign, like they belonged in someone else's story. Mom hugged me when it was over, but it felt like she was patching a wound too deep to heal. Marcus wouldn't look me in the eye. I tried to move forward. I took photos of the sunrise, drank coffee on the porch, told myself the worst was behind me. But safety doesn't return overnight. And 2 weeks later I found the Polaroid. It was tucked inside an envelope in the magazine rack. A Polaroid of me, asleep on the couch, blanket pulled to my chin, dated April 3rd, 2019. On the back, in Marcus's handwriting, for when she forgets who's real. My stomach dropped. I confronted him that night. Why is your handwriting on this? He paled. I just told Riley to keep an eye on you after the breakup. You were a mess, Jenna. It was a joke that spiraled. A joke? My voice shook. You handed me over like a project. Like I couldn't live without being watched. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We all thought we knew what was best for you. I locked the spare key in a drawer, hands trembling. That night I realized the true horror. It wasn't only Riley crossing boundaries. It was family, too. The people who loved me had blurred the line between care and control until I couldn't tell the difference. And love, when it's scared, can invent monsters. And sometimes it feeds them. The scariest betrayals don't always come from strangers. They come from the people who believe they're protecting us. Boundaries are not walls against love. They are the shape of it. Without them, protection becomes possession, and care turns into control. To truly love someone is to trust them to stand on their own, even when it terrifies us. I used to think friendship was a kind of shield. When you're little, you hold hands in the schoolyard, make promises under fireworks, and believe the bond will outlast everything. Parents fighting, high school drama, even heartbreak. I believed that about Lauren and Cassie. We'd built lemonade stands out of cardboard boxes, sat in detention together for passing notes, and once ran through sprinklers at midnight like the whole world belonged to us. But time stretches things, makes them thinner, and you don't notice when the threads begin to fray. The night it all broke for me was November 9th, 2016. I was 17. The rain hammered the lake cabin on Westfield Road so hard the windows shook. I lay in a borrowed sleeping bag pretending to sleep and listened to the voices of the two people I trusted most. I caught only 2 words, but they were enough to make my chest tighten. Tonight and gone. When I agreed to the sleepover, my mom had said, "Don't let nostalgia blind you. Old friends can cut deep." I rolled my eyes, like any teenager does when their mother sounds bitter, but I should have listened harder. My parents were splitting at the seams back then. My dad had already moved out, and my mom was stretched thin with worry, always telling me, "Focus on college, not drama." That's why the idea of a weekend with Lauren and Cassie had felt like a lifeline. We hadn't had a real sleepover in years. Life had pulled us in different directions. Lauren with her theater rehearsals, Cassie with her science fairs, me with my sketchbooks, and Noah, the quiet boy who played guitar and scribbled little riffs on napkins just for me. The cabin belonged to Lauren's parents. It smelled like damp wool and cocoa. Outside, the storm bent the birch trees, and the lake shimmered black like a restless animal. Inside, we tried to pretend we were still the same girls who once tied friendship bracelets until our wrists ached. We played Uno. Lauren slapped down her cards with too much force, smiling too wide. Cassie laughed, but it had an edge, like she was testing the sound of it. The jokes started harmless until they weren't. "You really think Noah's into you for your brains?" Lauren asked, grinning, but her eyes were sharp. Cassie chimed in, "Yeah, Emmy, you always get the attention. Some of us are tired of being extras in your movie." I forced a laugh. "Relax, it's just cards." But when I went to grab popcorn, I saw the way they glanced at each other, quick and secret, like a line in a play I wasn't given the script to. That night I lay in my sleeping bag listening to the storm. I kept hearing my parents' voices in my head. My mom's warning, "Don't go there to prove loyalty. Go because you trust them." My dad on the phone, "Sometimes friends outgrow each other, Em. Don't cling." At 12:17 a.m., the kitchen faucet turned on. Mugs clinked. I squeezed my eyes shut, breathing evenly, pretending sleep. Cassie's voice was low, trembling. "If we wait, she'll never get it. Tonight, Lauren. Tonight." Lauren's reply was cold, rehearsed like one of her monologues. "We'll make it look like she ran away. She's always so dramatic anyway." My blood ran ice cold. I thought about running then, bolting for the door, but my phone was charging in the kitchen, by them. Outside, the rain slammed against the dock, wild and relentless. I felt trapped, the zipper of my bag locked up around me like a shroud. Their footsteps padded closer. I heard a drawer slide open. A metallic clink. Cassie whispered, "Don't mess this up." Lauren hissed back, "She deserves it. She took everything. Noah, the spotlight. Even Mom says she acts perfect." Every memory of us laughing together suddenly felt like camouflage. I wasn't their best friend. I was their target. I tried to keep breathing evenly, but my pulse hammered in my ears. Their shadows loomed, stretching long across the floor. I thought about Noah, about how he once told me, "You draw people like you're trying to save them," but no sketch could save me now. When I felt the air shift, when I knew they were close enough to touch me, I moved. In one violent rip, I unzipped the sleeping bag and bolted upright. The lamp toppled, crashing to the floor. Lauren cursed. Cassie shrieked. I sprinted barefoot, knocking over a chair, and grabbed my phone cord from the counter. I didn't even look back. I just ran. The rain hit me like ice as I burst out the door. My feet slapped the muddy ground, slipping, but I didn't stop. 200 yards down, a neighbor's porch light glowed faintly through the storm. A dog barked. My lungs burned, but I screamed anyway, my voice tearing out of me raw. "Help, please!" Porch lights flicked on. The dog barked louder. I stumbled into the yard, gasping, pointing back toward the cabin. By the time I collapsed on the neighbor's steps, Lauren and Cassie hadn't followed. The police arrived within the hour. Lauren cried and swore it had been a prank. Cassie nodded furiously, her face pale, insisting, "We weren't serious, it was just a joke." But I remembered Cassie's trembling voice. Tonight or never. Mom met me at the station, her arms tight around me, muttering, "I told you, Emily, I told you." But it didn't feel like comfort. It felt like shame, like I had walked straight into the trap she'd warned me about. I moved in with my dad soon after. His place was quieter, safer. He didn't hover, just let me sit with my sketchbook. But I couldn't bring myself to draw faces anymore. It felt dangerous, like studying expressions too closely would reveal more betrayal. Noah stayed close. He held my hand in the cafeteria, walked me to class. But even with him, trust felt cracked, like a mirror shattered into too many pieces. Every reflection cut a little. Lauren and Cassie were suspended but never charged. Everyone at school whispered about it. Some thought I exaggerated. Others gave me looks like I was cursed. Either way, I learned fast that the world doesn't hand you sympathy just because you almost lost everything. 2 months later, I got a package from the school's lost and found. Inside was my sketchbook, the one I'd left at the cabin. My stomach twisted as I flipped through the pages. On the last page, there was a drawing I hadn't made, my own face. Eyes closed, mouth sewn shut with thick black ink stitches. Underneath, in Cassie's blocky handwriting, were the words, "Best friends forever." I sat on my bed for hours, the sketchbook heavy in my lap. I thought about Lauren's perfect rehearsed lines, about Cassie's obsession with control. I thought about my mom's warning, my dad's advice, and I thought about that night, when the storm outside wasn't half as violent as the betrayal inside the cabin. The scariest part wasn't the knife or the rain or even the running. The scariest part was realizing they had rehearsed my erasure for weeks, and that somewhere inside them, the performance wasn't over. The deepest cuts don't always come from strangers. They come from the people we let closest, the ones who know our secrets and our soft spots. Trust is a gift, not a guarantee. And friendship without respect is only a stage where envy rehearses cruelty. We must learn to draw boundaries, to listen to our instincts, and to remember that walking away from the wrong people is sometimes the bravest act of love we can give ourselves. The night was heavy with summer heat, the kind that presses against your skin even through layers of cotton sheets. I woke to the faint creak of a floorboard somewhere near the hallway. My heart hammered before I even opened my eyes. Daniel was away on a late business trip and the house felt unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that stretched every second into a minute. I reached for the bedside lamp, but the bulb fizzled with a sharp pop, leaving me in darkness. My fingers fumbled along the nightstand, grazing my phone, but before I could light the screen, I heard it. A whisper, low and sing-song, almost comforting. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." I froze, breath caught in my chest. The voice was familiar yet impossible. It belonged to Melissa, our neighbor. The thought made me dizzy. Why would she be in our house at 1:42 in the morning? Weeks before, Melissa had seemed harmless. Her visits were frequent but friendly, a pie here, a bottle of wine there, a quiet curiosity about our lives. She worked part-time at the bookstore down the street and claimed to love talking to neighbors, asking too many questions, complimenting things she'd only seen once. At first, I had brushed it off. She reminded me of my cousin, clingy but well-meaning. But lately, her presence had begun to gnaw at the edges of my comfort. She knew things she shouldn't. She seemed to appear in the wrong places at the wrong times. Daniel and I had bought the house 3 years earlier, a charming structure with French windows that looked out onto the hedge separating us from Melissa's kitchen. I loved the house. I had spent hours restoring the chipped wood, sanding floors, painting walls. even restoring the old fireplace in the living room. It had been my sanctuary, my space to breathe. But over the last months, it had begun to feel less like a refuge and more like a stage on which someone else could walk freely. I remembered my father's warning from years back. Robert, a retired carpenter, had always been blunt about boundaries. "People who want your walls will take your roof if you let them," he would say, as if the lesson had to be hammered into my head repeatedly. Now, with the creak of the floorboard, the fading light, the whisper that seemed to float through the hall, I understood precisely what he meant. Melissa wasn't just curious, she had begun to cross the line. I clutched the sheet to my chest and tried to convince myself it was a dream, but every instinct screamed that it wasn't. I'd noticed small things in the days before. My favorite candle missing from the living room, a framed photo of Daniel and me from our wedding gone for a few days, then returned with subtle differences. Objects had shifted slightly, drawers were left ajar, even our front door had been unlocked once when Daniel swore he hadn't touched it. I stayed frozen until I heard the soft padding of bare feet. My mind spun. Melissa had to be outside, right? She wasn't supposed to have a key. She couldn't just... Could she? I wanted to run, to scream, but I knew it would alert her. Instead, I slid the sheet off and crept toward the doorway, phone in hand. The whisper came again, closer this time. "You don't have to be afraid." My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. In that moment, fear wasn't just about Melissa holding a knife or stepping into our kitchen. It was realizing that she had been watching, learning, preparing. My sanctuary, the one place I had trusted completely, was no longer mine. I realized then that this invasion wasn't just about trespassing. It was about control, about making me question my own judgment, about shifting the balance of my life without ever lifting a hand, and somehow the thought of Daniel being away only made it worse. If he had been home, perhaps he would have stopped her. But now it was just me. Just me and a stranger who claimed to care more than the person I had promised to trust for life. Melissa's intrusion didn't happen overnight. It crept in, subtle and slow, until one day I realized my house no longer felt like my own. It started with small compliments, her eyes lingering on Daniel, the way she leaned in slightly closer than appropriate during neighborhood barbecues, brushing against his arm under the guise of casual touch. Daniel laughed them off. He never seemed to notice, or maybe he refused to. I wasn't sure which was worse, ignoring the signs or being blind to them entirely. The objects that began to vanish were the first undeniable evidence. My lipstick, perfume, even small pieces of our kitchenware disappeared. Occasionally things would return, rearranged or altered. I began checking every drawer, every cabinet, every corner for signs of tampering. The anxiety was constant, gnawing. Melissa's attentions had turned invasive. Her presence across the hedge in broad daylight always carried a knowing smile, a gaze that followed me even when I tried to ignore it. One afternoon I called my father. His voice was gruff, but steady. "Claire, you need to take this seriously. A neighbor is like a fence. Either they keep out trouble or let it in. Which kind is she?" "She makes me feel replaced," I admitted, my throat tight. "Then bolt your doors tighter than your heart," he said. I thought I had taken his advice seriously. I changed the locks, invested in extra latches, alarms, and cameras. But Melissa seemed to know the creaks, the rhythms of the house. She was always just a step ahead, appearing where she shouldn't, smiling too knowingly, offering help I hadn't asked for. I became obsessed with tracking her movements, noticing every visit, every fleeting glance across the hedge. I felt myself shrinking, my world closing into the small walls I had once loved. One evening, Daniel came home later than usual. I was pacing the kitchen, monitoring the cameras on my phone, trying to reassure myself that nothing was wrong. "Claire," he said gently, "you're obsessing. She's just curious, not dangerous." But the truth didn't feel so simple. Curiosity didn't enter a house uninvited. Curiosity didn't return missing objects with cryptic hints. Curiosity didn't whisper in the dark. I realized the tension had less to do with Melissa herself and more with the erosion of trust in my own instincts. I had always been confident, decisive, but now every sound, every shadow, every smile across the hedge seemed threatening. I began to sleep with my phone on the pillow, the brightness casting eerie reflections on the ceiling. Every time the floorboard creaked, my heart jumped. Every car door slammed outside. I held my breath. Melissa's attention had become a form of suffocating weight. The house, which had once been a haven, now felt like a trap, a theater in which I was being scrutinized endlessly. The breaking point came on July 23rd, 1:42 a.m. I woke to the creak in the hallway again, louder this time, deliberate. My pulse pounded as I lifted my phone to full brightness. Shadows moved in the kitchen. Melissa stood there, barefoot, holding one of my kitchen knives. The familiar calm in her expression was almost maternal, chilling in its intensity. "You don't see it, Claire," she said, voice soft, almost hypnotic. "He doesn't love you. He lies. I've heard the fights. I've watched him. I'm here to protect you." I swallowed hard, hands trembling. "You broke into my house." "Not broke in," she corrected, stepping closer. "I know the creaks now. The house knows me." My mind raced. Daniel was away. My father's voice echoed in my memory, warning about letting someone inside too easily. Fear twisted into anger and adrenaline. I needed a plan, a way to escape without triggering her. Slowly, I edged toward the back door, keeping the knife in her sight but out of reach. "Melissa, put it down, please." Her eyes softened, a flicker of hurt. "Don't call them. I'm the only one who cares." I didn't argue. I pressed 911 on my phone, speaking in a quiet whisper as I moved. Seconds later, sirens wailed in the distance. Melissa hesitated, eyes flicking toward the sound, and then she dropped the knife. The officers were inside moments later, taking her into custody without struggle. The aftermath was surreal. Melissa was charged with trespassing and harassment. Daniel tried to reassure me, holding me tightly. "She's sick, Claire. This isn't your fault." But even as he spoke, I felt the seed of doubt Melissa had planted. Had Daniel really been honest? Was she inventing stories to make me fearful? To control me? Every shadow in the hallway, every creak in the floor, reminded me that my sanctuary had been violated in ways words couldn't undo. I found myself obsessively checking locks, cameras, and even the hedge between our homes. The sense of security I had built over years of restoring our house was gone. I realized that trust, once fractured, was a fragile thing. And worse, it wasn't Melissa who had broken it. It was the invasion into my perception of reality, my ability to feel safe. 2 weeks later, I opened our mailbox to find a small parcel. Inside was the missing wedding photo, the glass replaced, the frame cracked. On the back, in neat handwriting, "A house can't hold two queens. One will always move out." I dropped it, glass shattering on the porch. The horror wasn't just Melissa's obsession, it was the doubt she left behind. The realization that even in the supposed safety of home, control could be wrested, trust could be manipulated, and the sense of being secure could be illusory. Daniel reassured me again, but the lesson was clear. Boundaries matter, instincts matter, and protecting your sanctuary requires vigilance. True security comes from respecting boundaries, trusting your instincts, and asserting control over your own space. Letting others overstep even subtly can erode safety and peace faster than any direct threat. I didn't always know I had a weakness for companionship. Growing up, my parents' divorce left me wary of closeness. My mom had been a whirlwind of stress and distraction, and my dad had vanished somewhere in the folds of bitterness and work. I learned early that people could disappoint you sometimes when you needed them most. Yet when Amber Rowe came into my life, I convinced myself she was different. Maybe she was, at least at first. I first noticed her in sophomore year at Seattle State University. The library was buzzing with the low hum of study lamps and whispered discussions. I was buried in my psychology textbook, sketching absent-minded doodles in the margins of my notebook. Amber was in the cubicle across from me, organized, calm, her notes color-coded with precision I envied. She had this quiet presence, a soft-spoken energy that made the chaos of finals week feel manageable. I watched her for a few weeks before working up the courage to speak. "Hey, do you mind if I sit here?" I asked one day, sliding into the chair across from her. She looked up, smiled, and nodded. "Of course. I like company while I study." From that moment, it was like a switch flipped. We became inseparable study partners, sharing ramen at the library cafe and late-night walks back to the dorms. I told her things I rarely told anyone, like my lingering fear of people letting me down, the quiet panic that sometimes stole over me when my thoughts spiraled. She listened, she understood, or at least she made me feel like she did. "Amber's like the sister I never had," I said to my mom once over FaceTime, my hand clutching a mug of lukewarm tea. "Different doesn't mean safe," my mom warned, her eyes sharp, voice soft but firm. I brushed it off, thinking she didn't understand. Amber was safe. She was my anchor. It wasn't until later that I realized safety can be deceptive. The first warning signs were subtle. Amber discouraged me from dating, insisting boys would only distract me. Notes started appearing in my textbooks, small at first. "Stay focused. Stay mine." Her handwriting was unmistakable. I told myself it was a coincidence, the stress of finals playing tricks on me, but the feeling in the pit of my stomach told me otherwise. Something wasn't right. And yet, I stayed. I needed her friendship, craved her attention. It was like a light I couldn't resist, even though my instincts whispered danger. It was early December, and the campus had grown quiet with the approach of finals. Snow hadn't yet come, but the rain turned the sidewalk slick and gray. I had been staying late in the library, the fluorescent lights buzzing like tired wasps above me. Amber's presence had become constant, almost claustrophobic. I sometimes felt her gaze follow me when I was on the phone with friends or scrolling through social media. One evening, I tried to meet Jason, a classmate I'd been casually seeing. Amber's reaction was immediate. She cornered me near my dorm after I returned from our brief coffee date. "You should have told me," she whispered, her voice trembling, almost fragile. But the look in her eyes, sharp, accusing, sent a shiver down my spine. Then there were the small intrusions, scratches on my locker spelling liar, whispered warnings when I mentioned leaving the library, knowing details from my private journal. The rational part of my brain told me Amber was just overly involved, maybe stressed. But every time I tried to pull back, I felt a tightening in my chest, a quiet terror that maybe she wouldn't let me go. I confided in my roommate, trying to sound calm. "She knows too much. Things I never told her." "Maybe you let her in too much," my roommate shrugged, sipping her coffee. "It's on you." I wanted to believe it was my fault, that I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Amber wasn't just a friend anymore. She had become a presence that followed me, blurred the lines between care and control. One night, I returned to my dorm after class only to find my car tires slashed. Panic rose in my throat as I called Jason for a ride. And then, almost on cue, Amber appeared at the dorm, pale and wide-eyed, her thermos of tea swinging in her hand. "I waited for you in the library. You should have texted me," she said softly, almost plaintively. I laughed nervously, trying to mask the fear rising inside me. But the dread stayed. She knew where I was. She knew what I was doing. And she was always watching. By the second week of December, Amber's behavior escalated. She would arrive at the library before I did, waiting silently in the shadows. When I tried to study alone, she'd hover nearby, commenting on my notes in ways that felt almost too precise, almost invasive. It wasn't just attention anymore. It was ownership. I started seeing Jason less, avoiding phone calls from friends, feeling like I was walking on eggshells. One night, I found a note tucked between the pages of my textbook. "You don't need anyone else but me." My hands shook as I read it. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't subtle. Amber had crossed a line, and I didn't know how to step back. I tried confronting her gently. "Amber, I need some space tonight," I said one evening in the library lounge. Her eyes went wide, almost hurt. "Why? I thought we were studying together. Don't you need me?" "I do, but alone too, just for a little while," I stammered. Her shoulders slumped, but her gaze never wavered. "You're trying to leave me," she whispered. "Don't you see? I'm the only one who stays." It was the first time I felt real fear. Not anger, not frustration. Fear. She wasn't just obsessive. She had a strategy, a way of making me doubt myself, making me question my own needs and instincts. I tried to tell myself it was temporary, a phase of final stress. But the late-night encounters, the strange knowledge of my life, the way she followed me from class to dorms, all pointed to a deeper, darker obsession. And then came December 11th. I had been at the library until nearly 2 a.m., textbooks forming a fortress around me, my eyelids heavy with exhaustion. I leaned back in the armchair for a moment, intending to rest my eyes. When I woke with a start, my laptop was gone. Across the lounge, Amber sat in the shadows, clutching it against her chest. "You don't need anyone else but me," she whispered, the words soft but terrifying. "Amber, give it back," I said, my voice trembling. My hand shook as I reached for my phone. She tilted her head, tears glinting in the library light. "Why do you keep trying to leave me? Don't you see? I'm the only one who stays." I backed away slowly, trying to keep calm. With trembling hands, I texted Jason one word: "Help." Within minutes, he arrived along with 2 security guards. Amber didn't resist when they retrieved my laptop. She only stared at me, voice breaking. "You'll regret this. No one else understands you like I do." Even as she was escorted away, her words lingered, sinking into me. The library no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt poisoned, every shadow suspicious, every sound a potential threat. My sanctuary had been invaded, my trust weaponized. Winter break brought no relief. 3 weeks later, at my parents' house, I opened the mailbox to find an envelope with no return address. Inside was one of my paintings, altered. My figure was crossed out, replaced by Amber's constellation doodles. A message was scrawled neatly on the back. "Stars don't need friends, they only need each other." My stomach twisted. Amber wasn't gone. She had simply moved her game to another stage. I realized then that some people's obsession doesn't end with removal, punishment, or distance. They persist, quietly and invisibly, leaving shadows behind. I transferred schools, but even then the memory of Amber's presence followed me. I learned to value boundaries, to recognize obsession before it escalates, and to listen to my instincts no matter how uncomfortable. Trust is precious, but safety is paramount. I had been lucky to have security guards, friends, and the clarity to remove myself. Not everyone has that chance. True friendship respects boundaries, allows independence, and never seeks control. Obsession disguised as care is dangerous, and trust must be earned cautiously. Learning to recognize unhealthy attachments and honoring one's own safety can prevent harm before it takes root. I used to believe betrayal was something you could outgrow, the way kids outgrow allergies or bad dreams. When I left Milwaukee for college, I told myself I'd never let anyone cut me open the way Chloe did, stealing the first boy I'd ever loved. That wound stayed with me, but I bandaged it the only way I knew how. I built new bonds, ones I thought were stronger than blood. Hannah became that bond. She wasn't just my roommate, she was my chosen sister. We shared everything from cheap ramen nights in dorm kitchens to whispered secrets about family and fears. She knew about Chloe, about my mother's constant warnings, about the way I sometimes felt like love was a fragile vase in my hands, and I didn't trust myself not to drop it. Hannah promised she'd never be the one to make me bleed. I believed her. By 27, I thought I had done it. I thought I had built a life that was untouchable. I had Mark, the boyfriend with the calm smile and patient hands, who slipped notes into my recipe books and played piano when he thought no one was listening. I had Hannah, the best friend who left sticky notes on my mirror with quotes about resilience and laughter. And I had my little empire online, my blog about cozy rituals, baking, plants, and books that gave strangers a reason to call me relatable. But perfection is brittle. All it takes is one hit, and everything shatters. For me, it happened at 2:37 a.m. on March 14, 2021, when I rolled over in my loft in Chicago, the city lights casting gold streaks on the wet pavement outside, and saw the buzz of an unknown number on my phone. I swiped, thinking it was spam. It wasn't. A video filled the screen. My sheets. My boyfriend. My best friend. The air left my lungs like someone had punched me, and in that moment, every wound from my past ripped back open. Chloe's laughter. My mother's voice. Love is fragile. Friends will either hold you up or break your ribs. I didn't sleep again that night. I lay there, staring at the exposed brick walls I decorated with thrifted frames and dried eucalyptus, and wondered how my life had collapsed in 30 seconds of video. The jazz record on the turntable had spun out long ago, leaving silence so thick it roared. By morning, I was shaking but steady enough to send one text. Meet me. Now. We met at a cafe 2 blocks away. Hannah arrived in my red coat. No, not mine, hers, but close enough that for a second it looked like me walking through the door. She carried my usual latte order and sipped it like she owned it. Her hair was perfectly curled, her smile just a little too calm. When I shoved the phone toward her, she didn't deny it. She didn't flinch. She smiled, cruel and deliberate. "Do you really think he loved you?" she asked, voice dripping with pity. "He told me things, Sophie. He said you're boring now, that all your plants and bread making are cute, but suffocating. He needed someone more alive. I've been alive for him all along." My voice cracked. "You were supposed to be my sister." Hannah leaned forward, eyes glittering. "And sisters share everything." I almost slapped her, but instead I stood, grabbed my bag, and left. Outside, the cold air felt like knives. I didn't cry until I locked myself back in my loft and collapsed against the door. That night, I double-bolted the door. I baked bread, because that was my coping ritual, kneading until my hands ached. The smell should have comforted me. It didn't. At 3:11 a.m., I woke to silence that wasn't silence. Something felt off. I padded to the door. It was unlocked. I swore I had secured it. My heart hammered as I flicked on the bathroom light. Across the mirror, written in crimson lipstick, were the words, "He's mine now." My knees buckled. My phone slipped from my hand, clattering on the tile. I called my mom, sobbing so hard I couldn't form words. "Sweetheart," Marianne said, her voice steady steel. "Leave, right now. Don't stay where ghosts wear your friends' faces." I couldn't leave. Not yet. Pride or fear kept me rooted. I scrubbed the mirror until my arms ached, but the words wouldn't disappear from my mind. The next days blurred. Anonymous texts buzzed my phone. Still baking for him? He eats with me now. Instagram DMs filled with screenshots of Hannah and Mark at restaurants I had introduced them to. A bouquet arrived at my door. Red roses, no note. I tore them apart until petals carpeted the floor. I was unraveling, and Hannah knew it. I tried to confront Mark. I needed answers. Needed to know if he was a willing traitor or just Hannah's pawn. We met in the park, neutral ground, the city buzzing around us. "I didn't want this," he said, looking small for the first time since I'd known him. "Hannah's unstable. She kept pushing, kept showing up. I was stupid. You let her," I snapped. "You chose her." He shook his head. "It wasn't like that." But I had the video. I had the lipstick on my mirror. I had roses dying on my floor. I didn't believe him. Trust had rotted. and there was no salvaging it. That night I packed bags. I planned to leave for Milwaukee, even if it meant facing Chloe again. Maybe time had softened us. Maybe family, however fractured, was safer than this. But when I dragged my suitcase into the hallway, I froze. On my welcome mat sat a candle flickering gently, one of Hannah's handmade candles. The label read in her neat script, "Sisters Forever." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about Mark. He was a tool, a bridge. Hannah didn't want him. She wanted my life. I filed a police report for harassment. The officer nodded sympathetically, but without direct threats, without proof of entry. It felt like paperwork destined for a drawer. I blocked both Hannah and Mark. I deleted Instagram from my phone. I stopped answering emails from sponsors. I moved into my mother's house for 3 months, retreating into her arms like I was 17 again. Marianne held me tighter than she had in years. "I told you, Sophie," she whispered. "Your weakness is your heart. Don't let people use it." For weeks I tried to breathe normally. I gardened with my mom, read books I couldn't finish, tried baking but threw the loaves away untouched. The internet speculated about my silence. I didn't care. I thought distance had saved me. I was wrong. On June 7th, 2021, a package arrived at my mom's house. It was addressed to me in careful handwriting. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. My breath caught. It was me, sleeping in my childhood bedroom. The angle was too close, too recent. On the back, in Hannah's handwriting, were 5 words. "Even family can't keep us apart." Beneath it, smaller, "You'll always be mine too." The walls closed in. My mother's warnings echoed louder than ever. I had thought Hannah's betrayal was about Mark, about jealousy. But this was deeper, darker. Hannah didn't just want to take something from me. She wanted to consume me, to own me. And the worst part? I had once called her my sister. I had chosen her. Betrayal by a lover can cut deep, but betrayal by someone you called family slices to the bone. Trust is sacred, and giving it away blindly can be the most dangerous mistake. The lesson I learned is this: not everyone who wants to stand close to your fire comes to keep you warm. Some come only to watch you burn. I always believed in loyalty. Growing up in Chicago, my dad drilled it into me. "Alicia, people will smile at you, shake your hand, and stab you in the back before you know it. Watch who you trust." I nodded and laughed at the time, thinking corporate life wasn't about trust, it was about skill. I believed in skill. I believed in hard work. I believed in friendship. That belief extended to Grace Lang. We met at Silverwood Consulting just after I transferred from a smaller firm. Grace had this natural magnetism, polished, charismatic, and always poised. When I first saw her poring over spreadsheets in the break room, she offered me a warm smile. "Need help navigating Silverwood?" she asked. I nodded, grateful. Over time, we became office allies. Late nights turned into shared takeout, coffee runs, and whispered strategies in the break room when no one else was around. She brought me soup when I was sick, stayed late when I couldn't finish a campaign deck, and listened when I admitted my insecurities. "You've got this," she said softly during one long night. "That's why I've got your back." And I believed her. Our bond was cemented over deadlines, shared stress, and the Riverfront Hotel campaign, the project both of us coveted. Grace had a way of making me feel like we were a team, inseparable in ambition and vision. I trusted her with drafts, ideas, and even the rawest insecurities about whether I was cut out for corporate life. But my father's words never fully left me. "A smile in the office doesn't always mean a friend," he said over the phone one evening. I laughed, reassuring him. "Dad, Grace isn't like that, we're a team. If I win, she wins." "No, Alicia. If you win, she loses. Don't forget that," he warned. I tucked his words into the back of my mind, dismissing them in favor of faith in our alliance. I thought I could navigate ambition without betrayal. I was wrong. The first signs were subtle. Reports I had carefully prepared disappeared from the shared drives, only to return hours later with minor edits, or, sometimes, untouched, but with strange metadata changes. Grace would email them back with a smile. "Found this buried under the wrong folder. Don't worry, I've got you." I brushed it off, assuming oversight, until our boss called me in one morning. "You sent this email to a client?" he asked sharply. "It's rude, inappropriate, and unprofessional." I froze. I hadn't sent any email. My stomach dropped. Grace, standing by my cubicle, leaned in slightly. "Maybe the system glitched," she said softly. "Don't stress. I can smooth this over for you." I should have felt relief at her support. Instead, a seed of doubt took root. Something felt deliberate, too precise, too convenient. Over the next few weeks, incidents multiplied. My slides were subtly altered, my reports edited, ideas removed from presentations. Grace was always nearby, the perfect friend, smiling and reassuring me that things happen. The whispers followed soon after. Co-workers began hinting, subtly, that I wasn't meeting deadlines, that I might not be up for the campaign. All of it traced back, one way or another, to her. I confided in my older sister one night over wine. "What if I'm imagining it? Paranoid?" I asked. She paused, leaning back in her chair. "Are your reports missing?" "Yes," I admitted. "Are people whispering about you?" "Yes," I said, throat tight. "Then it's not paranoia, Alicia. It's sabotage. Stop calling her your friend." Her words echoed long after we hung up. I wanted to deny it. I wanted to believe in our friendship. But the evidence, small, insidious, consistent, told a different story. October 14th started like any other late night at the office. The Riverfront Hotel pitch loomed over me, and I had stayed late, determined to finish my designs. The lights dimmed automatically, leaving only the faint glow of my screen. I leaned back to stretch, coffee in hand, and froze. Across the floor, Grace sat at my desk. My pulse jumped as I realized she had plugged a flash drive into my computer. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered, though I knew she could hear me. Grace turned, smiling like she'd been caught doing nothing at all. "You weren't supposed to see this," she said softly. "But you should have listened when I told you not to compete with me. There's only room for one of us at the top." The office suddenly felt smaller, oppressive. Her calmness was terrifying. It wasn't fear of violence. It was the precision, the certainty, the way she had orchestrated everything around me, erasing my credibility, undermining my work, and keeping the mask of friendship on. My hands shook. I reached into my bag and began recording with my phone. Her eyes flickered when she realized, and for the first time, her smile faltered. "You'll regret this," she hissed, yanking the flash drive free. The next morning, I handed the footage to HR. Grace denied everything, claiming I was unstable, jealous, overreacting. I felt my stomach tighten as the meeting dragged on. The footage spoke for itself, but the whispers began anew. Colleagues questioning if I had dragged personal drama into the workplace. The Riverfront Hotel campaign was reassigned. My promotion vanished in the fallout. I went home that night to my father, eyes red from crying. "I did everything right," I said quietly, "and I still lost." "You didn't lose, Alicia," he said, steady and calm. "You survived. That's more than most. Remember that." I tried to believe him. I tried to rebuild. But trust, once fractured, is like shattered glass. Every office encounter, every friendly smile, carried a weight I couldn't shake. I had learned the true cost of relying on someone who only played friend when it suited them. 2 months later, I started at a new firm in West Loop. The office smelled of fresh paint and coffee, my desk neatly arranged. For a moment, I felt relief. Maybe I could start over. Then, a folded note on my desk caught my eye. In faint, looping handwriting, familiar somehow, was a single sentence. "We're not done. Friends don't quit on each other. No signature. No indication of how it got there. The faint scent of lavender lingered on the paper. My blood ran cold. Grace had always been one step ahead. The game hadn't ended. It had only shifted boards. I realized then that vigilance is a lifelong skill. Trust must be earned, guarded, and occasionally withdrawn. I folded the note carefully, placing it in my bag. I would survive. I had survived before. But the lesson had been carved into me. Friendship and ambition can coexist, but betrayal can hide behind the brightest smile. Not all who call themselves friends act in your best interest. True alliances respect boundaries, recognize ambition without undermining, and operate with transparency. Protect your work, your trust, and your space. Survival often depends more on caution than goodwill. I used to believe college was going to be the clean slate I'd been waiting for my whole life. Back in Oregon, people knew me as the quiet girl who drew murals in her notebooks and kept her head down while her dad worked 12-hour days at the repair shop. My mom had left years earlier, leaving behind nothing but a few blurry photographs and a shoebox of broken promises. Dad did his best to raise me, but the truth is, I learned early that loneliness can make you crave people in a way that's dangerous. When I boarded the plane to Boston for Ashton College, my dad squeezed my shoulder and said, "Don't trust easy smiles, kiddo. You've got a soft heart." I laughed like it was a corny line from a movie, but it stayed with me. Because when I met Rachel and Tessa during my first week, they were all easy smiles and open arms, and I mistook that for safety. They were sophomores, seasoned, magnetic, everything I thought I wasn't. Rachel was a theater minor who wore vintage perfumes and always seemed to have an audience. Tessa had an alt-rock edge, bass guitar slung across her shoulder, sarcasm dripping from her tongue like second nature. And me? I was the freshman clinging to them, sketchbook in hand, grateful not to eat alone in the dining hall. We became inseparable, or at least it looked that way from the outside. Library study marathons, thrift store hunts, coffee runs at 1 a.m. I thought I'd found my place finally. But sometimes belonging is just a trick mirror. It shows you the version you want to see, not the reflection waiting underneath. The first cracks were easy to ignore. They always are. Rachel would joke about my boyfriend Jordan, a senior who had noticed my sketches in the library. "He's out of your league, babe," she'd say, smiling too wide. "Careful." Tessa, tapping her pen so hard it dented the table, muttered once, "Don't forget who helped you fit in. Boys leave. We don't." I laughed it off, too eager to keep the peace. I didn't want to be the dramatic friend, the one who couldn't take a joke. But one night, walking back from the art building, I passed their dorm room and heard Rachel's voice through the door. "She thinks she's better than us. Watch her crash." The words stung, but I told myself I'd misheard. I told myself the way they looked at me sometimes, sharp, assessing, wasn't what it felt like. I told myself too many things. Then came the invitation. Rachel leaned against my desk, perfume clouding the air, and said, "Come to the Riverside party. One night, no Jordan, just us. We'll remind you where you belong." Her tone was light, but the word belong caught in my chest. I wanted so badly to believe I still did. The frat house at 212 Riverside Drive was pulsing when we arrived, bass rattling the old floorboards. I clutched a red cup, untouched, trying not to feel small among the strangers pressed shoulder to shoulder, shouting over music. "Loosen up, Maya," Tessa urged, pressing a cup back into my hand when I set it down. "Don't be such a saint." I sipped once. The taste was too sweet, syrupy. My instincts told me to put it down, so I did. Rachel's eyes narrowed as if I'd broken some unspoken rule. Later, in the cramped living room, Rachel leaned close, her breath hot with alcohol. "You think you're special because he chose you? We made you, don't forget." I tried to laugh it off, but it came out thin. "What are you talking about?" She smirked. Without us, you'd still be the sad little freshman eating lunch alone. I stood, heart hammering. I think I'm done here. Tessa blocked the door, smirk sharp as glass. One night won't kill you. Something inside me twisted. My dad's voice echoed. Don't trust easy smiles. My heart pounded against my ribs like it wanted out. It only got worse as the night deepened. Strangers pressed in too close. Rachel whispered into one of the boys' ears, and he laughed, eyes sliding toward me. She'll go along, I overheard her say. She owes us. When someone suggested a game of truth or dare, Rachel's voice sliced through the crowd. Maya first. No, I said, shaking my head. Tessa's face twisted, ugly in the strobe light. God, you think you're better. Watch how fast you fall. The room felt smaller, the air thick. I shoved past them, stumbling into the hallway, and bolted into the bathroom. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone as I locked the door. I dialed Jordan. When his voice came through, I nearly sobbed. Please, come now. I'm at Riverside. 10 minutes stretched like an eternity. Fists pounded on the bathroom door. Laughter echoed. Then I heard Jordan's voice, loud, firm, cutting through the noise. When he pulled me out, Rachel's voice followed. Run, little saint. We'll tell them you begged for it. By Monday morning, the rumor spread like fire. Maya hooked up with half the frat. People whispered in hallways, professors gave me lingering looks, strangers stared. Rachel and Tessa walked the halls, smiling sweetly, arm in arm, as if consoling me. Their performance was flawless. Jordan believed me, stood by me. But the damage was done. My reputation tanked. I dropped my art elective because every time I tried to draw, I heard their laughter. My sketches of cityscapes turned into scribbles I couldn't finish. At home, my dad's voice on the phone was tight with worry. Em, you okay? I'm fine, I lied. You don't sound fine. I wanted to tell him everything, but how do you explain to someone who's worked with wrenches and grease his whole life that friendship can be sharper than any blade? 2 weeks later, I found a padded envelope in my dorm mailbox. No return address. Inside was one of my own sketchbooks, the one I'd left in Rachel's dorm weeks earlier. The pages were ripped out, defaced with thick black marker. My murals of Boston streets were ruined, slashed through with one repeated sentence scrawled in Tessa's messy handwriting. Better than us? Never. On the last page, taped crookedly, was a photo from the Riverside party. Me, mid-scream, eyes wide, Rachel's arm draped around my shoulders. Underneath, in block letters, best memories are the ones we make last forever. I sat on my bed, sketchbook in my lap, staring until the words blurred. The horror wasn't supernatural. It was ordinary, cruel. I realized then the true trap wasn't the party. It was believing they ever wanted me to belong. Sometimes the people we crave the most are the ones who can break us deepest. Loneliness makes us vulnerable, but real belonging doesn't come from people who need to control or diminish us. It comes from those who want to see us whole, even when we shine. Protect your heart, honor your instincts, and never mistake envy for love. The fluorescent lights in St. Augustine Memorial flickered again as I rubbed my eyes trying to shake off the exhaustion. 3:12 a.m., according to the digital clock above the nurse's station. The trauma ward was quiet, too quiet. I pressed my palms against the counter, hoping the hum of the overhead lights would help me focus, but the buzzing only made the air feel heavier. I'd been working nights for 6 years now, and I knew what silence could hide. I thought about my father as I leaned there, staring at the empty hallways. He'd died when I was 19. Heart attack in a waiting room. The doctors slow to respond. That night had etched itself into me. Every time a patient gasped or panicked, a part of me tensed, remembering that helpless feeling. I swore back then that it wouldn't happen on my watch. I became the guy who stayed late, checked vitals twice, hummed softly in empty rooms, played piano in the lounge. Caring was my refuge, my weapon, my way of keeping guilt at bay. Derek Hale slid past me without a word, coffee in hand, his shoes squeaking lightly on the tile. He had that charm, the kind that made people trust him instantly. He joked about being a night shift wizard, carried a folding chess set in his locker, and had a way of making even the most frustrated nurses laugh. I'd trusted him. We had each other's backs, or so I thought. The first unsettling sign came subtly. A patient's IV was disconnected. I remembered asking Derek if he'd seen anything. He just shrugged. "You probably forgot to secure it. Long nights, man." Later, a crash cart malfunctioned while I tried to revive a patient. Derek clapped me on the shoulder, calm as ever. "Don't sweat it, I'll cover for you." I laughed, nodded, thanked him. But a nagging thought persisted. Things weren't adding up. Rumors started to slip through the cracks. A nurse whispered one evening, "Be careful, Carter. Derek said you've been dozing off on duty." I laughed it off again. Surely someone was exaggerating. But that evening, when the patient in room 214 screamed, someone tried to smother me. I froze. Derek was standing beside the bed, arms folded, calm as if nothing unusual had happened. He whispered to the attending. Carter was here. He looked exhausted, must have leaned on her chest while checking vitals. My stomach dropped. That wasn't just wrong, it was terrifying. By the next morning, the supervisor called me in. I walked through the snow, numb, trying to remember if I'd done something, anything, that could explain this. I remembered my mother's words over the phone a week ago. "A friend who competes with you isn't a friend. Remember what your father always said, a wolf doesn't bite unless it's hungry." I thought about that now, bitterly. Derek wasn't a friend. He was a wolf, and he had been circling me all along. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, but the signs were stacking. Machines malfunctioning during my shifts, misplaced instruments, minor accidents that always seemed to point back to me. Derek's calm demeanor only made the accusations sharper, like ice against skin. And the worst part? I couldn't prove it. Not yet. One night, I confided in my sister. "He's framing me, I can feel it, but if I accuse him without proof, I look paranoid." "Then stop calling him your friend," she said sharply. "Stop letting him sit at your chessboard. Friends don't move pawns to trap you." "Easy to say when he's the only one keeping me awake through these nights," I muttered, more to myself than to her. I started watching Derek. At first, I just observed quietly. Small things, his way of lingering in empty rooms, fiddling with charts that weren't his, moving items just slightly out of place. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then, a patient coded, and the defibrillator pads were missing. Derek's explanation? Carter prepped the room earlier. Must have misplaced them. The patient didn't make it. My chest burned with guilt and fear. I realized he wasn't just sabotaging me. He was orchestrating disaster, shaping it carefully so no one would suspect him. I started documenting everything. Hidden camera in my scrubs pocket. Small, but effective. I caught him slipping syringes into drawers, tampering with machines, approaching patients at odd hours. One night I watched him enter room 307 with a pillow. My hands shook as I pulled it away just in time. He smirked. "Always the hero," he whispered. I wanted to scream, to report him immediately. But I had to be strategic. Any false accusation would land me in more trouble than I could handle. Weeks turned into months, each shift a balancing act between doing my job and catching him in the act. Every patient, every machine, every detail was a potential trap. My sleep was shredded. My mind ran in endless loops, trying to predict Derek's next move. Even outside work, the anxiety followed me. Friends noticed I was more withdrawn. My sister called me almost nightly, worried about my pale eyes and clenched jaw. "You're obsessed," she said once. "You need a break." I knew she was right, but stopping wasn't an option. If I let him slip even once, someone could die. Finally, I had enough. The footage was undeniable. Derek manipulating IV lines, tampering with medications, entering patient rooms unobserved. I went straight to the administration. They launched an internal investigation immediately, suspending him pending charges. Relief washed over me briefly, but it didn't last. The damage had already been done. Patients whispered when I walked by. Nurses eyed me with suspicion. Supervisors nodded politely, but trust is not rebuilt with words. Even after Derek was removed, the hospital felt tainted, the shadows following me down every hallway. I tried to focus on my patients, but the paranoia lingered. Every knock at the door, every misfiled chart, every faint flicker of a light set my nerves on edge. 2 months later, I transferred to a hospital in Cleveland. A new start. I told myself the past was behind me, that I could rebuild my life, regain trust, heal from the trauma. First shift, first day, I opened my locker, a chess piece taped to the inside. Derek's Black Knight. No note, no explanation. I felt the old chill crawl down my spine. The game wasn't over. He had been moving pieces long before I noticed, and somewhere he was still thinking 5 steps ahead. I shoved the piece into my pocket and took a deep breath. The lesson was bitter but clear. Trust is fragile, vigilance is vital, and sometimes the only way to protect those who depend on you is to rely on yourself. Even now, years later, I replay those nights in my head, aware that evil doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, smiling, waiting for the right moment to strike again. Trust must be earned, not assumed. Vigilance and personal responsibility can prevent disaster when those around you cannot be trusted. Protect what matters most, but never ignore the warning signs of betrayal. I always prided myself on being independent, on managing a chaotic life without losing control. Night shifts at Portland General Hospital were exhausting, but I thrived on routine, precision, and the small victories of helping patients heal. Still, the moment I became a mother, my world tilted in ways I hadn't anticipated. Oliver, my 4-year-old, was the center of everything, yet I constantly felt I was failing him. My husband Chris did his best with long delivery shifts, but even together, we were stretched thin. That was why Carla seemed like a blessing at first. She had been my best friend since high school, and I trusted her implicitly. When I started returning home bleary-eyed after 12-hour shifts, she was there to greet Oliver with her warm, steady presence. He laughed for her, reached for her, and, without realizing, I found myself depending on her as much as he did. "Meg, you can breathe for a moment," Carla said one evening as I collapsed onto the couch, Oliver clutching his stuffed bear. "I've got him. You go rest." Her voice was soothing, unwavering. I believed her, and in those early months, I relaxed into her help. But then, small things started to gnaw at me. Oliver's first word for mommy slipped out as Carla during a play date, and I chalked it up to toddler confusion. But the guilt it triggered was sharp and immediate. I had been too busy, too absent. One night I noticed Oliver humming a tune in his sleep, a lullaby I didn't recognize. I tiptoed to his room and saw Carla in the rocking chair, silhouetted against the moonlight streaming through the blinds. My heart nearly stopped. She hadn't been scheduled to babysit that night. She wasn't meant to be there. And yet, there she was, holding him gently, singing softly. "Carla?" I whispered, unsure if I was dreaming. She turned, smiling faintly. "He was having trouble sleeping. I thought I'd help." I forced a laugh, my voice brittle. "Right. Thanks." But the unease didn't fade. A sense of intrusion, of trespass had settled in the pit of my stomach. The lines between friendship, trust, and overreach were already blurring, and I didn't know how far Carla was willing to cross to be part of our lives. Carla's presence grew more pervasive as winter waned into spring. At first it was subtle. She showed up at the daycare pickup lingering longer than necessary, asking about Oliver's routines and preferences with a curiosity that made me uneasy. I began noticing small intrusions in our home. One night I found her bracelet tucked under Oliver's bed. She swore she hadn't been there, but I couldn't shake the suspicion. Oliver's drawings began reflecting something I hadn't taught him. Two women holding his hands, smiling, labeled Mommy and Mommy. The lines and colors were soft, careful, almost as if guided. Teachers started making casual remarks, unaware of the tension building inside me. "Carla is such a sweet mom," one said after a snack session. My stomach dropped. The word mom echoed in my head unsettlingly. Chris was pragmatic, but even he couldn't fully grasp the emotional weight I carried. "Megan, she's just helping because you're never home," he said one evening, exhaling tiredly. "I know she's helping," I replied, my voice strained. "But she's overstepping. Oliver calls her mommy sometimes. That's not normal." "You're exhausted," he said, softening. "Don't let guilt make a villain out of someone who cares about him." I wanted to believe him, but deep down I knew the problem wasn't just guilt. Carla was filling a void I hadn't realized existed, one in Oliver's life and, disturbingly, in mine. I began to see her not as a friend but as a shadow figure, a presence slowly merging with our home, our routines, our son. The tension escalated over the following weeks. Megan's instinct told her something was wrong before she could see it clearly. One night, Oliver woke screaming, terrified. "Auntie Carla was in my room," he cried. I rushed in, heart pounding, only to find the house locked, doors secured. Chris dismissed it as a nightmare, but I couldn't. Something in me knew it wasn't entirely a dream. 2 days later, returning home early from a night shift, I found the house dark, eerily quiet. The front door had been locked, but the living room lights flickered as I approached Oliver's room. There, Carla sat in the rocking chair, gently stroking Oliver's hair and whispering lullabies. My throat went dry. A wedding photo I had placed on the dresser weeks ago had been moved. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice shaking. Carla looked up, startled but smiling. "This house is already mine," she said softly. "You're the one who doesn't belong." I froze, uncertain if fear or disbelief anchored me to the doorway. She wasn't violent, not in a physical sense, but the quiet certainty in her voice made my skin crawl. She had been inside my home, touching my child, asserting an ownership that wasn't hers. I realized then that her obsession had grown beyond boundaries. It had become territorial. Chris finally understood the gravity when I confronted him with the latest incident. "She's in his head, Chris. He listens to her. Even when I'm around," I said, tears threatening to spill. He swallowed hard, frowning. "Then we have to stop her. Lock her out. Call the police if we need to." The problem was deeper than access. Carla had ingrained herself into Oliver's mind with lullabies, drawings, and gentle affirmations. Even if she were removed physically, the psychological hold remained. I started monitoring every visit, locking doors, double-checking schedules, trying to reclaim the space in Oliver's life that should have been ours. And yet, it all came to a head on March 18th. At 12:43 a.m., I was jolted awake by the faint sound of a lullaby drifting down the hall. My pulse spiked as I crept toward Oliver's room. Moonlight revealed Carla in the rocking chair, holding his hand, whispering in that same calm, soothing voice. "Don't you see, Meg?" she murmured. "You're always gone. He needs someone steady. I'm here. I'm always here." I lunged, pulling Oliver into my arms, my phone raised to call the police. The sirens came minutes later, but Carla only whispered to him, "I'll see you soon, sweet boy." Her smile never faltered. Carla was served a restraining order, her claims of just helping dismissed by the court, but many neighbors still whispered sympathy. They couldn't understand the insidiousness of her obsession, the psychological hold she had attempted to establish over my son. Life after that was fragile. I quit night shifts, spending as much time with Oliver as possible, trying to rebuild routines she had attempted to dominate. But the scars of fear and guilt lingered. Oliver, innocent as he was, still asked sometimes, "When is Auntie Carla coming back?" And then came the final reminder. 2 months later, he brought home a new book from daycare. Inside, in looping handwriting I recognized immediately was a note. For my honeybee. Mommy will always be here, watching over you. I sank to the floor, clutching him close, scanning the playground from the window. Somewhere out there, Carla still existed, still watching, still waiting, convinced she had a role that was never hers to claim. The lesson hit me with clarity. Vigilance, boundaries, and the courage to protect what matters are never negotiable. Even trusted friends can overstep, and obsession disguised as care is dangerous. Protecting loved ones means recognizing unhealthy attachment early, asserting boundaries firmly, and acting decisively before harm becomes inevitable. Moving into Hawthorne University felt like stepping into a new life. I wanted everything to be perfect. My dorm, my schedule, my routines. My parents' recent separation left me craving stability, and I thought college would give me that sense of normalcy. My dorm room was small but mine. Fairy lights strung across the walls, photos of sunsets and friends taped up, my camera perched neatly on the desk. I loved photography. It was my way of freezing the world in a frame, holding on to a moment when everything else felt chaotic. Then there was Jenna, my assigned roommate. Friendly, organized, and bright-eyed, she seemed like someone I could finally relax around. She always had snacks in her desk drawers, remembered birthdays, and could chat endlessly about neuroscience. I felt lucky. Maybe for the first time in months, I had someone I could trust. We spent the first few weeks joking about finals, sharing coffee, and comparing schedules. I remember calling my mom one evening giddy. She's perfect, Mom. Organized, smart. She even makes me tea when I'm stressed. My mom's voice came through the phone, cautious. Sweetness isn't the same as kindness, be careful. I laughed nervously. You're paranoid. Jenna's the first person here who actually feels like home. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. The walls of the dorm, the creaking pipes, the cold nights, the buzzing fluorescent lights, felt warmer with Jenna around. I didn't notice the small things at first. My camera moved slightly, photos missing, subtle rearrangements of my desk. Jenna would always smile and say, "Maybe you misplaced them." Stress, I told myself. Finals were coming up. Everyone was tired. The first night it happened, I woke to the familiar sensation of being frozen. My body refused to move, my lungs straining, my heart hammering. The ceiling fan spun lazily, casting shadows that seemed to creep along the walls. At the edge of my bed I could sense a presence. Too close, too still. I couldn't scream. It wasn't my imagination. Jenna's figure leaned over me. Whispered words slipped into my ear. "You look so peaceful when you can't move." I jolted awake, gasping, my body finally responding. Jenna sat at her desk, scribbling in her journal, calm as if nothing had happened. My stomach churned. I tried to convince myself it was stress, but deep down I knew it wasn't. During the next week, the episodes multiplied. I started noticing her watching me in subtle ways. At the desk, in the common room, lingering too long near the doorway. She'd ask casually about my dreams, and I realized she knew things I hadn't shared. Details of nightmares, moments from childhood, even small insecurities. One afternoon, I confronted her lightly. "How do you know that?" Jenna shrugged, calm and collected. "I just remember. Things people tell me. Things they show without realizing." I tried to laugh it off, but laughter felt hollow. Every step in the dorm made my stomach tighten. I started confiding in my older brother over the phone. "I think she's studying me, like I'm an experiment." "Then get out of there, Sophie. Switch rooms," he said, sharp, protective. "I can't. If I tell Housing, she'll know. And she'll be angry. I don't want to know what she does when she's angry," I whispered, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles hurt. The sleep paralysis continued. Each time Jenna was nearby, observing. One night I woke mid-paralysis and saw her leaning over me. Her voice was soft but deliberate. Your fear is pure here. No pretending. I tried to scream, tried to push myself awake, and when I finally broke free, she was gone, sitting at her desk, writing meticulous notes. I glanced at her journal, curious and terrified. The page read, 3:17 a.m., attempted scream, failed. 3:19, whispered to her. 3:22, breakthrough, eye contact while paralyzed. My heart pounded. She wasn't keeping secrets. She was documenting my fear like it was some kind of experiment. The next day, I pretended to leave for class but circled back, determined to find more evidence. The dorm room felt oppressive, the walls closer than usual. I spotted her journal unlocked on the desk, and my hands shook as I flipped through it. Page after page described my sleep, my reactions, my smallest movements and sounds. Pulse rate, faster. Breathing, shallow. Tears formed, yes. It was deliberate, invasive, horrifying. I packed my essentials into a bag and stormed straight to housing services. My voice trembled as I explained everything. The sleep paralysis, her presence, her notes. They moved me to a new dorm immediately. Jenna protested, claiming research notes, and insisting I was overreacting. Even in a new room, the feeling lingered. My sleep was disrupted. Shadows in the corners of the room made me jump. I couldn't turn my lights off at night. Every creak of the dorm floor echoed in my chest. Weeks passed. I tried to regain normalcy. Classes, friends, photography. I thought I was safe. I even started sleeping with the lights dimmed. Then, 2 weeks after moving, a plain envelope appeared in my campus mailbox. No return address. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a photograph of me asleep in my new dorm. On the back, written in familiar, precise handwriting, "Paralysis isn't necessary anymore. You're always wide awake to me now." My hands went numb. The fear I thought I'd escaped followed me. The sleep paralysis was nothing compared to this. She had crossed the line completely. She was still watching. I clutched my camera like a shield, scanning the hallway, trying to reassure myself that I wasn't trapped. The true horror wasn't the darkness. It wasn't the dorm creaks. It was the knowledge that someone could study you, manipulate you, and invade the smallest corners of your life while wearing the mask of friendship. I would be vigilant. I would be cautious. And I would never assume that someone's sweetness meant safety again. Trust is earned, not given blindly. Even the kindest gestures can hide harmful intentions. Boundaries, awareness, and vigilance are not paranoia. They are necessary shields in a world where appearances can be deceiving. Protect your personal space, your privacy, and your peace of mind. Sometimes survival depends more on caution than on goodwill.